This is Parts Designer. This is, I think, the sixth shape. It's a tough one, so we're going to do it together. We're going to break this up into like its base and then this little upright portion. We're going to start with the base. What is the main shape the base is? Well, it's a rectangle with some features cut out like a fillet and a hole. The entire rectangle is 40 by 100 by 20 millimeters tall, so we're going to start with that. Go 100, tab, 40, tab. I don't need a tab. It's already 20 millimeters tall. There. Now let's carve out this hole. How long is the hole? Well, it doesn't give me that dimension, but it does tell me that this little leg right here is 12 millimeters wide, and so is this one. So if the entire length is 100, we need to take away 12 and then another 12. So 100 minus 12 gives you 76. So you know the distance between here and here has to be 76. That's the length of our hole. Its height is 8, and then its width, well, it cuts through the entire object, so its width is 40. So we need a 76 by 8 millimeter tall by, it doesn't really matter how wide it is, hole. And then I'm going to center it, and again, doesn't matter how wide it is as long as it cuts through the entire object. Here we're golden. We're going to click Control G to group it, and we are good. Next, we need to carve out the fillets, or the rounded corners. We know the radius of this fillet has to be 6. If you already have a fillet made in like your creations, you can use that, but you need to change something about it. I'll talk about that in a second. If you don't already have a fillet made, we're going to make one from scratch. So you'll drag a cube out and a cylinder. The cylinder has to be twice the diameter of your cube. My cube is a 20 by 20 cube, so my cylinder has to be 40 by 40. Now I'm going to crank these sides up to 64, so it's an actually smooth cylinder. It's not all blocky, and then I'm going to align the corners, group it together. Now I have my fillet shape, or the what needs to be carved out of the fillet shape. I'm going to knock it over 90 degrees and elongate it, but remember, the radius of my fillet has to be 6. Currently, it's 19.94, so basically 20. So I need to change that to 6. And its height also needs to be 6. Its length can be whatever it wants, so long as it cuts through the entire object. Now we need to align these guys. How do we do that? Well, we will align their tops, and then we'll align their leftmost edges. Now, I didn't mean to do that. Before we group this, here's a little life hack. We're going to duplicate it. So click on your fillet, click Control D. Now there's 2 fillets there, but only one is selected. With my left hand, I'm going to click Shift, and then I'm going to click on my base. So now I have 2 shapes that are selected. I'm going to group it, and you're going to notice there's still a fillet here. We're not going to go, no, don't do that. Just take your base and rotate it 90, 180 degrees, and then group this guy. It's going to line up perfectly. We just saved ourselves a bunch of time. Now that we have our base made, let's carve out these holes. The radius of these holes is 6, which means the diameter must be 12. And those holes, the center of the holes are 20 millimeters from the edge of our base. Now, there's not a dimension that says that it's not centered, so we're going to assume that it is right smack dab in the center of the object. So let's drag a hole out here. We said radius was 6, so the diameter must be 12. We're going to go 12 here, 12 here. Always crank those sides up to 64. That way it's actually a round cylinder and not like, I don't know, a polygon. Then we need to figure out how to put the center of this guy exactly 20 millimeters from this edge. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to drag a ruler out here, and currently I'm in midpoint mode. So there's a dimension that tells me how far away the middle of the object is from our origin. My origin's this circle right here. I don't want midpoint mode right now, so I'm going to click Use Endpoint, and that tells me that the edge, this corner of my object, is 8 millimeters away from the origin. On the x-axis, 12, and the y-axis, I want that to be 0 for my x and my y. I want the corner of my object to be right smack dab on the origin. Then I'm going to click on this guy. Now remember, my dimension over here said that the center of the circle was 20 millimeters from the edge. So I need to click on use midpoint. I'm going to click on this guy, and the center of the object needs to be 20 millimeters from the edge of my base. So I'm going to click 20 there. Now I know the distance between here and here is good. Now I just need to center it. So I'm going to use the alignment tool, and I'm going to get rid of this work plane, get rid of this ruler. We need to sink this hole down into our object. Now, I'm not going to click group quite yet. I'm going to click Control D to duplicate it, click Shift to select my base, and then group that duplicate so that I can rotate my object 180 degrees, and I know that that hole is going to be exactly where it needs to be. You can only do that on shapes that are perfectly symmetric. In this case, this shape is. So, my holes are good. Next, we need to work on this upright. Now, this upright is made up of a rectangle with a cylinder on top of it, and then we carve a hole through both those shapes. We're going to start with the cylinder. The rectangle. The rectangle is 20 inches wide by 40 inches long. How tall is it? Well, it's 24 inches tall. So, pretty easy. Throw this guy right here. 40 in this direction, 24 tall. And we'll click center, center, group it together. Alright, we're going to have to refresh. Beautiful. Now we need to throw a cylinder on top of this guy. Always crank your sides up to 64, that way it doesn't look weird. And the cylinder needs to be as wide as our object is, so it needs to be 40 by 40. And in this case, let's just call this our width. Our width has to be 20. And we are going to align these guys, but we're not going to group them, right? You can tell that once something is off in this direction, let's center there. If I were to group this, there would be a weird corner right here, and we can't have that. Why is that there? Well, the center of our circle has to be 24 millimeters off of this plane right here, off of the top of our base. So we need to make sure the center of this guy is 24 inches from essentially this corner right here. How do we do that? Well, let's throw a work plane on that face. Let's drag our ruler out and click on this guy. Currently, I am in endpoint mode. I want to know the measurement between the center of my cylinder and this guy, so I need to click on midpoint mode. Where is that? Well, it's in a super inconvenient spot. It's right here. So we're going to click use midpoint. And did that work? No, it didn't. Come on. There we go. We're in use midpoint mode. Click on this guy. No, we're not. Why are we not in midpoint mode? There we go. How are we? Okay, yeah, there we go. So the midpoint is, right now it's 30 millimeters. From here to here, it needs to be 24. So we're going to type in 24. And that should line up this guy perfectly with the edges of my rectangle. Let's group that together, see what it looks like. Beautiful. Look at that. There's no weird cracks. That's what we want. Now let's get rid of these dimensions because they are super annoying. Now I'm actually going to ungroup this. I did that by double clicking on my object, and I'm going to lock this cylinder in place. I just need to ungroup everything. This guy's locked, which means it can't move. That's what we want. We need to put a hole right here. That hole has a radius of 12 or a diameter of 24. So we're going to throw a cylinder up here, crank those sides up to 64, go 24, tab 24. We're going to align the centers. Now, The solid cylinder is locked in place so it can't move. I'm going to click shift and then click on my hole. When I click align, I know that my solid cylinder is not going to move and only my hole will. And that's what we want. So it's completely centered. It's perfect. Now I'm going to unlock this cylinder and select everything, group it together. Beautiful. There's no weird lines. That's exactly what we want. Alright, last thing we need to do is fillet this corner and this corner. Now I highly suggest you don't ungroup all this and then steal this fillet from right here, duplicate it, turn this out. I wouldn't do that because when you start ungrouping things and then regrouping them, you tend to screw something up and then you get weird seams that you can never fix. And then you have to restart the object all over again. So I really wouldn't do that. Just make the shape fresh, or better yet, make the shape and then save it under your creations. Now I can make a fillet pretty quickly, so there's not a whole lot of time lost. We'll go 40, crank those sides up to 64, align. Make this guy super tall, and this guy needs to be 6 by 6. Now, it actually needs to be 40 tall. Let's just make it 40 tall right now. Flop it over on its side, 90 degrees, and then we're going to put a work plane right here. I'm going to click D to drop it to the work plane, so I know the bottom of my fillet lines up perfectly with this face. Then I'm going to throw a work plane right here, and click D. That's going to drop my fillet to that work plane, so I know face-wise it is flush against this face and this face. There's going to be no weird cracks or seams in there. I'm going to get rid of my work plane, and I'm going to center that, and I'm going to group it. And let's hope and pray that nothing weird happens. Oh yeah, beautiful. No weird cracks. Now I am actually going to duplicate this guy, send it on over here, because I want to and I don't want to remake that fillet. And there's a very low risk of me screwing anything up. Throw a work plane right here, click D, group it together, and hope that there's no weirdness. Doesn't look like there is. Boom. Beautiful. Hey, we made the object.